Before we had kids, Kelly and I got talked into running a marathon with some friends. Why? I'm still not sure, because as you can see, I'm not really built like a long distance runner. I'm built like a linebacker. But whatever, let's run a marathon. Why not? So we started about 6 or 7 months out before the race with training, and Saturdays were going to be our milestone runs. Our first Saturday run, we ran, it was like 2 miles. It was just it. From there, we would build up distance on Saturdays up until the race. And then during the week, every single week, we would have various runs that were, some of them were shorter, some of them were longer, but we just kept building up. And over that 6-month period leading up to the race, we went from 2 miles to 5 to 7 to 11 to 16 to 19 to 21 miles. And honestly, like, you know how much I ended up enjoying those runs? Not a bit. Not at all. I mean, it was cool running with Kelly. That was great. But there is no such thing as a runner's high. It is a myth, and all of you runners have been lying for years, okay? It doesn't exist. Now there was a purpose to these runs. Like, I thought the purpose of these training runs was just to bore me to death and wear me out, but there wasn't. The whole point of this training was to build us up physically and mentally. Because here's what we found out, and anybody that's run a marathon will tell you this. You can push yourself physically through that race to a point, but somewhere along the line, around mile 19, 20, or 21, your body just hits a wall, and it's done. And at that point, you can't just physically make yourself do it anymore. You gotta be mentally strong enough to push yourself those last 5, 6, 7 miles. What all that training was doing, even though I despised it, all that was doing was building mental and physical endurance. Because without endurance, there was no chance we were getting done with that marathon. There's no chance I'm finishing it without endurance. Endurance is the ability to withstand hardship or adversity. That's all it is. That could be physical, that could be mental, could be spiritual. It could be all three. Can I push myself through this adversity, whatever it is, for an extended period of time? Because adversity is never short. It's never quick. If it was, you wouldn't need any kind of endurance. Like, anybody can withstand a quick shot of hardship. Like, anybody can push through this brief amount of adversity, whatever form it is. Like, if a marathon was only 2 miles long, I would have just woke up the day of it and ran it. I would have not had to have a need for a 6-month training period. That would have been ridiculous. But it's not quick. And the problem we have today is it becomes much harder to build endurance into ourselves today when we have this desire for instant gratification and we've got a shortened attention span. It makes it much harder to build endurance. I mean, it's really hard to endure through something if I have this expectation for instant results all at the same time. I've got this expectation and a shortened attention span because of these things we keep in our pockets, these screens that we have. That we're connected all the time. We have instant information that's constantly changing, where our attention spans have been worn down, and this desire for instant gratification makes it so much easier to give up. It just does, instead of enduring. But enduring is never quick. Endurance is withstanding hardship and adversity for an extended period of time, maybe an indefinite period of time. And the other thing that endurance will do, not only will it give you the ability to withstand adversity, but also it's gonna form a pattern in you. See, when you quit once, it becomes easier to quit again. But if you endure once, it becomes easier to endure again. You know, it's really easy to say to somebody, you know what, why don't you just suck it up and endure? It's really easy to say that, it's really easy to have that attitude, but doing it, that's much different. That could be whether you're enduring physical, mental, spiritual, or all three. It's a whole different ballgame. So how do we actually endure? Anything that we face, like, how do we actually do that? Well, I read something pretty interesting about the how we actually endure things. There was a PhD candidate and athlete named Joan Vickers, and she wanted to figure out what was the secret behind elite athletes' ability to be resilient and endure in pressure situations. So as she was doing her research, she found something that she termed the quiet eye. And what she found is the quiet eye was this visual perception, this visual process where you would fixate on a focal point, and that would allow the athletes to have this keen sense of focus that would override any physical or mental distraction. Basically, it was the act of focusing in on one thing so tightly that that was what got you through any kind of obstacle, any kind of challenge, the loss, the pain, the opposition that any athlete would face in their sport or competition. Now, that fixation point could change in every sport. It could change in every scenario. But what she found out in her research was that this visualization process was so incredibly critical to an athlete's ability to endure the most grueling situations without caving under the pressure or giving up. So here's my question to you. When you face hardship and adversity, because we all do, and we all will, when you face hardship and adversity, what are you looking at? What's your quiet eye focused on? If you had 1 week to live, what would you be focused on? Now, we hit on this last week when we started this new series, 1 Week to Live. We hit on this that all of us are going to have a week to live. And if we knew when that week was going to start, in a way, that would actually be a gift because then you would know how much time you've got left, and then theoretically, you would maximize that time left. So another question we hit last week was then, if you knew, would you spend that time or would you invest it? Would you subtract something from your life, or would you invest it so there's multiplication, so that there's compound interest taking place? See, we approach life as if it's something to spend. That's a consumer mentality. Jesus, however, viewed life much differently. He viewed his own life as an investment, and he viewed yours as something to invest instead of spending. And what Jesus did in the last week of his life, because he was an investor, he did things in that last week that have continued to set ripples ever since, continued to create compound interest up until this day. So the example we got to take from Jesus and his last week to live is we've got to live with that same 1 week to live intentionality, whether it's our last week or not. Because today could actually be the start of your last week. I hope it's not, but it could be. Or it could be 70 years from now. Either way, if you have breath in your lungs, you have the ability to create ripple effects that will be changing people and blessing them for the better well after your week is up. That's what the gospel will do. It's exactly what the gospel will do. You are called to live and invest your life in a way that blesses people, in a way that transforms people, because that's what the gospel does, because you've been transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because you've shared the gospel, because you've lived it out. You've lived and invested your life in a way that blesses people, families, and generations in an amazing way that makes it no longer temporary, but now it's eternal. You're called to that. But the cool thing is you don't have to own the pressure of it. You don't. You can't change anyone. Like by yourself, you can change no one. Wives, how many of you have changed your husbands? Yeah, all right. See, nobody raised their hand. You can't do it. Well, I'm going to still try. You can try. You're not going to change them, right? You can't change anybody by yourself. You can't transform anybody by yourself. Only Jesus can do that. He will change, care, and bless people, families, and generations through you. Like if you let him, he'll work through you. And if you want to see your life as an investment that is multiplying and changing people and places for the better well after your week is up, all you got to do is follow his lead. You just got to follow his lead. And on top of that, you're also going to have to endure some stuff. You will. The good news is you and I are not alone in this. Jesus, the Son of God, he had to endure some physical stuff, mental, spiritual things. He had to endure all kinds of things. Let me just give you a couple examples. On the mental side, at one point, Jesus was teaching, and his mom, brothers, and sisters showed up where he was at because they thought he lost his mind. Like, no joke. At this point, they didn't realize who he really was and what he really came to do, but they show up to this spot where he's preaching. They show up because they think he's crazy. And they want to take him home so he can go lie down and not embarrass himself or the family name anymore. I mean, it'd be like my parents and my brother and sister walking in here today, coming up on stage, putting their hand on my shoulder and saying, "Come on, Matthew." They call me Matthew. You don't get to call me Matthew. "Come on, Matthew, it's time to go home and lie down." How humiliating would that be? I mean, it feels weird even saying that right now. It'd be humiliating and discouraging if your family, and you knew it, if your family thought you were crazy, wouldn't it? I mean, how discouraged did Jesus have to feel in that moment when his earthly family thinks he lost his mind? Now, they would completely reverse course after the resurrection. Then they know who he was. Then they didn't think he was crazy at all. They thought he was Lord instead of a lunatic. But that was still a few years away. He had to deal with that discouragement up until the resurrection. I mean, that's going to be mentally taxing, isn't it? Or frustrating people. How many of you, safe place, how many of you have had to deal with frustrating people? Okay, there's some honest people in here, and then there's some liars, right? We've all had to deal, or maybe you are the frustrating person. I don't know. Maybe I should have thought about that before I asked. No, frustrating people, right? Jesus had to deal with frustrating people all the time. People that were arrogant and that tried to trap him. His own disciples. Man, it takes a lot out of you to deal with someone who's frustrating, especially over an extended period of time. Jesus did it for 3 years. And he had to do it without losing his mind. Dealing with frustrating people can be mentally taxing and exhausting. Or multiple times he was run out of town. It's going to mess with your head, isn't it? Multiple times he was threatened. That's going to take some mental exhaustion from you. And what about this on the spiritual side? Jesus had multiple temptations thrown at him by Satan in Matthew 4. In Luke 4, he's got a bunch of demons that are taunting him. For 3 years, he had the religious leaders attack him and challenge him. That's got to take a lot of spiritual maturity and endurance to not fold under that. On top of that, he's got to bear the weight of the world, the sin of the world on his shoulders. It's pretty intense. And while he's bearing the sin of the world on his shoulders, God the Father has to look away from him because he can't bear to see all the sin that Jesus is carrying on the cross. That's why in Mark 15:34, Jesus cries out, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? You got to endure that spiritually. And then he's got physical endurance. He served crowds and crowds of people day and night. That'll take a toll on you. He was homeless. He walked almost everywhere, and he got very little rest. That will do it to you physically also. And then he's got to endure torture and the crucifixion in his last week. He's beaten with rods. He's punched multiple times in the face. He's flogged with 39 lashes from a whip that was designed to peel flesh from bones. And it was done by Roman soldiers who were experts in inflicting the maximum amount of pain without killing the person. They were literally trained to bring a person to the brink of death without crossing that line. And then he was crucified. One of the most painful and agonizingly slow ways of execution that mankind has ever come up with. Horrific. Not only that, it's the most humiliating form. He endured all of that in his last week. Here's what's crazy. He could have tapped out. He could have avoided all of it. All of it. He could have avoided it. He could have just said the word and it's over. He's the Son of God. He can do what he wants. He could have just said the word and be done with it. And honestly, I think I probably would have. Especially because none of it was Jesus' fault. It's because of what other people did. It's because of what you and I did. He wasn't responsible for any of the stuff that he's got to endure. I would have tapped out in a heartbeat, but he didn't. Why? Why? Because he couldn't save himself and be savior of the world. You know, the Pharisees mock him. They're like, oh, you said you could save yourself. Well, come down from the cross. He can't even save himself. No, he couldn't save himself if he wanted to save the world too. He couldn't save himself and save you. So instead, he chose to endure all that. He chose to endure it to bring God glory. He chose to endure it to fulfill his purposes. He chose to do it to save you. Endurance is always, always, always a choice. You can choose to endure or you can choose not to. And there are consequences either way. If you choose to endure, here's the consequences for whatever situation it is. If you choose to give up and tap out, here's the consequences. Endurance is always a choice, and he chose it. But how? Okay, it's one thing to say, all right, I'm going to endure through this. That's noble and mighty, great. But how do you actually do that? Hebrews 12 says exactly how. Here's what it says. Hebrews 12, starting in verse 2. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. If you have any kind of church background, you've heard those verses before, right? And they sound awesome. I mean, listen to this. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and he's seated at the right hand of the throne of God. That sounds awesome. And sometimes that's where we leave it. It sounds really cool. But we got to see what this is actually pointing at. I mean, this is talking about what Jesus did in the last week of his life. So if you have 1 week to live, is this the way you're living? I mean, if you have 1 week to live, and we all have 1 week left, we just don't know when that week is going to start. And if we did know, then we would maximize the time. But honestly, shouldn't we always live like there's one left? And that can sound almost cliche. Like, okay, yeah, cool, Matt, let's live like 1 week left. Seize the day, I get it. That sounds a little cliche. But here's the truth, like this is the example Jesus is providing for us in his last week on how to endure. If you want to follow his model, here it is. If you want to live a life of endurance, live a week of endurance. Like sometimes we just look to the end. If you want to live a life of endurance, live a week of endurance, one at a time. That's what Hebrews 12 is talking about. One race at a time, one race at a time. And maybe you're thinking, well, cool, great, man, that sounds nice. But easier said than done. Doing that's a little bit different. Because things are hard right now. And honestly, they've been hard for, I don't know how long. It's just, I can't even think. I'm just trying to survive in my marriage. I'm just trying to survive in my job. I'm just trying to survive in these hostile and divisive times. So forget endurance. I get it. But isn't that the reason why Jesus' model of endurance for us is so critical right now? Like we need it more now than maybe we ever have. Because right now, everyone's quitting everything. It's just easier to quit everything. Feels a lot less painful, seems safer. Like, I'm just gonna give up on my marriage, that seems easier. I'm just gonna give up on my job. I'm just gonna give up on this relationship. I'm just gonna give up on the church. I'm just gonna give up on my faith. I'm just gonna give up on my group. I'm just gonna give up on all of this stuff. It just seems easier to give up right now. Like we're in the middle of the great resignation. People are quitting everything, every area of their life. But hear me on this. Quitting becomes a habit quickly. And if you give up on something that you can endure through, then later on in life, you're going to give up on something that you shouldn't or you can't. Whatever that is. And on top of giving up on whatever you shouldn't or can't, you're gonna miss out on a massive opportunity. So let me ask you just a couple of questions. Here's the first question. What race is set before you? Like what Hebrews 12 is saying, what race is in front of you right now? Because you have a race, I have a race, everyone that's joining us online, like if you're in Colorado or different states, we have people in different countries and continents. Every single one of us has an individual race that you have to run right now. You know what it is. Maybe people in your family know, maybe people in your group, some friends know, but you know exactly what race is in front of you right now. And whatever that race is, you got two choices. You can run it, or you can give up. Those are your options. And your life will be one big race made up of multiple races along the way. And at some points, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be awesome. And at other points, you're gonna wanna tap out. And one of the biggest things, maybe the first thing that will trip us up, if we don't want to run with endurance the race that is set before us, that inspirational verse, that sometimes that's where we leave it, if we want to get tripped up, the first thing that will trip us up is complaining. It will. So can I be really direct with you for just a second? And every time I ask that, you know I'm going to say it anyway. I'm just trying to be polite, okay? Brace. We are called to run the race, not complain about the track. We're called to run the race and not complain about the track. And honestly, this is a struggle for me at times. I struggle with this. You know, whatever track I find myself on, if I don't like it, or if it's a struggle, a serious struggle, I can complain. I wasn't going to go into this, but I'm going to right now. So some of you know about, man, today's a hard day for me. Some of you, some of you know that my brother lives in Indianapolis. He suffered a massive seizure on the day of the fires. And I got a call from my sister who's sobbing, who's not an emotional person, who usually is pretty strong and can contain herself. She's sobbing, saying, hey, our brother's in the back of an ambulance right now and he's not responsive. He had a massive seizure. He was in the hospital for over a week, had multiple seizures still there, never found out what was wrong with him, did all kinds of tests, still don't know the answers. Yesterday afternoon, I get a call that he's in the back of an ambulance again. And he had another massive seizure, this time at my parents' house, and my dad found him. And then hearing that your dad is messed up by it. My dad's Superman to me. It's just messing with me, and I can complain about it right now because it ticks me off. And I'm not there to help my little brother. I've got the big brother complex where I take care of my brother and sister. I love them both. But why am I not there to help? Why is he still going through this? Why isn't there any answers to this? He's got a wife and 2 little girls that he's trying to take care of. They saw him have the first grand mal seizure. My nieces saw that. And what I'm wrestling with is, right now, that's a track in my life that I didn't choose. I have no choice over it. But I want to complain about it. I want to get mad about it. And when you complain, it does nothing. But also, complaining is that little voice that will whisper in your ear that says, give up. It's too hard. Give up. Don't go through this. So instead, let me do some things that are destructive and some things that are sinful that'll make me feel better or that will take my mind off it. I deserve it to indulge in this or do this, right? That's what complaining will help whisper into your ear, along with the temptation the enemy will throw at you. Complaining is the first step to quitting, and I can't quit on my brother right now. If I complain, I'm quitting. And honestly, we all live in a time where complaining is a second language. It is. We're all guilty of it. We're all susceptible to it, me very much included. But here's the thing. I'm not talking about a situation that might be harmful or abusive. If you're in an abusive situation, you don't endure through that, you get out of it. Whether that's sexual or physical or verbal. When we talk about adversity, there's some adversity that's good for you, that'll push you and will grow you. And then there's toxic adversity. Abuse is toxic. You don't endure through that. You get out of it. And if that's you right now, you come find me. You come find one of our staff members. You come find one of our leaders in the church. And we'll be discreet and we'll help you and we'll walk with you. That aside, I'm not talking about that now, but the other side of the coin is this. Just because something is hard doesn't mean that it's harmful. And you've got to decide. So what do you need to endure right now with the race that's in front of you? What do you need to endure? Maybe you need to endure some criticism of your faith, criticism of the truth of God's word and the gospel and obedience to God. Maybe you need to endure that instead of lashing out, which would be a way of caving. Like if you're getting opposition to your faith, blustering up and getting all defensive about it, that's lashing out. Now you've caved, or running and hiding just because the world opposes Christianity. It does. It opposed Jesus. He said it would happen to us. It does. So maybe you need to endure the fact that the world opposes Christianity. Or maybe you need to endure some stuff going on at home right now with one of your kids. Or maybe it's a bad diagnosis that you just got and you need to run that race well. Or maybe you need to endure the loss of somebody, someone you love. Or maybe the end of a friendship. Maybe you need to endure some tough stuff at work right now. Maybe you need to endure the fact that you're just in the season of transition and it's taken a lot out of you. I'm being very vague on purpose here. You fill in the blank with what's going on in your race. What do you need to endure right now? And the second question is this. What are you looking at? What's your quiet eye focused on? Who for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. Jesus was looking at joy. That's how he endured the cross. It was joy for him to endure the cross. Like as crazy as that sounds. It was joy for him to fulfill his purpose. It was joy for him to bring glory to God the Father. It was joy for him to make a way of reconciliation for us and God. It was joy for him to make a way of salvation for you. It was joy that Jesus' quiet eye was focused on. That's how he was able to see the crown beyond the cross. Like so often we'll see a cross in front of us, and I'm not talking about the cross of Jesus Christ. We'll see some kind of cross, like an obstacle or hardship or adversity or loss or challenge. We'll see this cross in front of us and say, man, I can't do that. That's too hard. That's too painful. Let me just get another track. I can't do this. We look at the cross and we don't see the crown that's behind that. It said for the joy that was set before Jesus. That means the race that is set before us, no matter what race it is, no matter how hard it is in front of you, there's joy in it. There is joy in it. You just got to keep looking at Jesus. That's what Hebrews 12 says. In fact, that is the secret to the Christian life. It's right there in that verse. The absolute secret to living a life as a Christ follower is keep looking at Jesus. That's it. And that's the endurance and that's the encouragement we need right now so that we don't cave under pressure, so that we don't give up. So don't look at all the distractions in the world. Just don't. Don't look at the enticements and the temptations. Don't look at the setbacks. Don't look at the pain. Don't look at the opposition. Don't look at the discouragement. Don't look at the attacks. Just keep looking at Jesus. Because when we look in the wrong places, endurance is impossible. If you look in the wrong place, you will not be able to endure. And honestly, we look in the wrong places a lot. We just do. We look at other people and we compare ourselves to other people. If I can get ahead of them, if I can be better than them, if I can beat them, then I would be good. We just keep looking at other people instead of the race in front of us. And if you're looking at other people, you can't look at Jesus. Back in 2012, going into the Olympics, Michael Phelps was the dominating presence in swimming. In fact, he's the greatest swimmer of all time. He's the GOAT, right, for swimming? Well, there was this guy, he was from South Africa. I don't remember the guy's name. He was good, but he was very outspoken about beating Phelps. He talked about it a lot. In fact, he was focused on Michael Phelps and not the race. So maybe you remember this picture from the Olympics. You remember this? Do I even need to say what I'm going to say right here? You got it already? He's looking at Phelps. Michael Phelps isn't looking at other people. He's not looking at that dude. Phelps is looking at the finish line. He's looking at the race right in front of him, and that's why he won. This guy, he came up short. If you're looking at other people and looking to other people, you're going to come up short. By the way, comparison is just self-inflicted discouragement too. Don't look at yourself either. But we live in a world that tells you can be your own God. Genesis 3, right? You're the one that can achieve things. You're the one that can do whatever you want. You're the one that has the strength to accomplish anything you want. Now here's the problem with that. At some point, you are going to face something in life that you cannot get through just with your own grit and willpower. It's going to happen. Something that you cannot get through no matter how mentally strong you are. You can't get through this thing. And when that happens, if you're looking to yourself, you're your own Savior, your own God, when that happens, it's going to be very demoralizing when you realize I can't do this. You're going to tap out. You're going to give up. You're not going to make it. But if you're looking to Jesus, if you're looking at him, if we keep looking at him, I don't care what you're dealing with right now. I care. But it doesn't matter what you're dealing with. There is endurance, and he will get you through it, no matter what it is. So what are you looking at right now? The road that's in front of you, the race that you're on. Are you looking at the opposition? Are you looking at the discouragement? Are you looking at the cost? Are you looking at the loss? Are you just looking at the crown? Or are you looking at Jesus? Are you looking at Jesus, or are you looking at someone or something else? You have to answer that. Be honest with yourself. Endurance in this world is 100% based on looking to Jesus in all things, for all things, and through all things. That's the way you'll be able to see the crown beyond the cross. And here's what's really cool too about endurance. Endurance is not just a means to an end. It's not. It's not just something that you have to build so that you can get through whatever race that you're running. At the same time, endurance will also build something in you. Another classic verse, Romans 5, verse 3, it says this: We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces what? Character. And character produces hope. So you can either be broken by things that you suffer, or you can be sharpened by them. The bridge between suffering and character is endurance. Like if you want to take your suffering, and we all experience suffering. Like Bill, like what he's going through right now, that's suffering. And what I've heard from multiple people in our communities is that that man's a man of character. And that he looks like Jesus. He's taken his suffering, and with endurance, it's turning into more and more character. He was a giant before, he's going to be even better after this. If you want to take what you're suffering and turning it into character, you got to endure. You have to. Like the world desperately needs character right now, does it not? Yeah, it does, right? We need men and women of strong, reputable character, people that look like Jesus and have the character of Jesus. We need that now, badly. But there's no fast track to character. Like you can't buy it, and it doesn't come on easy street. So hear me on this. Don't avoid things in life that are hard. Don't. Don't run from hard things. Don't run from disappointment. Don't run from discouragement. Don't run from loss or adversity. All you're going to do is deny yourself an opportunity to develop character through endurance. And on top of that, you're going to reinforce a habit of giving up when things get hard. Parents, do not protect your kids from hard things. Do not protect your kids from something that is hard or might be disappointing or they might fail at. Don't do that. All you're doing is denying them an opportunity to develop character at a young age, which is priceless. Yeah, walk through stuff with them, absolutely, but do not protect them from something that is hard or might disappoint them or they might fail at or they might be sad because of it. Don't protect them from that. All you're doing is setting them up to be shell-shocked later on when they face the world on their own, and now they don't have the character that they need to get through stuff on their own, let alone lead other people. So here's the truth for all of us. Here's the truth for all of us. What you become will be a result of what you're willing to endure. What you become is a result of what you're willing to endure. The race that's in front of you right now, I'm gonna get it in your head, whatever it is, think about it. The race that's in front of you right now, are you gonna run it? Or do you wanna tap out? If you run it with endurance and you keep your eyes on Jesus, if you keep focusing on him, if you keep going, then wisdom can come from pain. It can. Courage can come from fear. Strength can come from suffering if you're willing to endure. I mean, just think about somebody right now that you admire and somebody that has great character. Somebody who looks like Jesus, and you think, you know what, man? I want to be like that person. There's some of you in the room right now. I think of you when I think of this. Man, I want to be like that person. I want to have character like that. I want the people around me that I love and care about, I want them to have this kind of character. I want my kids to have this kind of character. Whoever that is that popped up into your mind, I guarantee you they've been through some stuff. They have. And the reason why they have character that you admire and you want is because they endured through it. What you become will be a result of what you're willing to endure. And I know I know they're rough right now. Things are shifting constantly. Feels like our culture is imploding on itself a little bit more each day. What's going to happen next with Russia and Ukraine? How's that going to keep affecting the rest of the world? There's wars and rumors of war. Inflation is rough. When's the great resignation going to end so we can build back some stability into the job market? There's just a lot of growing and birthing pains. There's a lot of labor pains right now. So for just a second, let me just say one more thing. As your pastor, I want to encourage you for just a second. Whatever's in front of you, whatever race you're running, whatever track you're on, you have nothing to worry about. You don't. Jesus is still king. He's still sitting on the throne. He was able to see the crown beyond the cross, so you can too. So whatever you're going through right now, whatever you're going to struggle with down the road, keep going. Keep looking at Jesus. Don't tap out. Man, Your character is going to get built through endurance in ways that, man, is going to be gold to you. So keep going, don't tap out. Your call is to run the race of faith. That's what you're called to. And what the race of faith looks like, here's what it looks like. It means persevere in the settings and seasons that God has placed you. Right now, God is not surprised where you're at or what you're dealing with. Persevere in those settings. Persevere in this season right now. The race of faith also means hold on to your convictions. Hold on to the truth of the gospel. Hold on to the truth of God's word. Hold on to obedience in him and to him during these seasons and these settings. Now, the race of faith means continue to grow in your relationship with Jesus. Continue to glorify him. The race of faith means you lead other people to Jesus and lead them in their next steps of growth. And the race of faith means you be a part of how God is transforming people and places through your service, through your sacrifice, through your generosity. Because if you endure, you win. That's a promise. If you endure, if you keep looking to Jesus, you win. Let me show you an example of what this endurance looks like. Check this out.
June 1st, 2020, I was diagnosed with renal cell carcinoma, that's kidney cancer. And then in June 2021, doctors confirmed that it has spread to my lungs and abdomen, so I am stage 4.
And I am stage 1 breast cancer. I have had surgery and have removed the cancer and am technically cancer-free at this point in time. But it's my second round, so hopefully it stays that way. I'd say the hardest thing is just having to do it twice. I was 7 years cancer-free, and I thought I was good, and then I wasn't. And that was really, really hard for me to work through those feelings of why. And then there's just all the doctor's appointments and the waiting and the scans and the, oh, maybe this time, and scheduling appointments, and then it's COVID. All those things have just been really, really hard to kind of navigate.
I think for me the hardest part has been what the possible future will do to my family, and especially my daughter. To think about missing out on some things, like maybe when she gets married or has a baby, and I want to be there for those things. And I think about my parents, and I think about my friends, and that will be, when that day comes, that will be hard for them, and so I think more about them than I think about anything that might happen for me.
The first time I had cancer, I was like done with it. I was like, after it was over, I was like, I don't want to see this anymore. But this time, I wanted to have purpose and meaning, and I think that's probably the biggest thing I see is change how I want to live life. I don't want cancer to define me. My identity isn't in cancer. I have cancer, but my identity is in Christ, and I want to live with purpose, and I want Him to use my life for however He wants, for however many days, I get on this earth.
And I don't know if there's anything else on the face of the planet that can give us hope like Jesus Christ can. And that hope in eternal life. And like Vicki said, whether we die tomorrow or 10 years or 20 years from now, I have that knowledge that I'm going to be in heaven. I think that's where that peace comes from. It's just, I know that's where my hope is.
He is like the place that I go to lay it all down. He's the person who's my stronghold. First and foremost, He helps me get through this. I've gotten to the place where when I'm in pain and working through the recovery, because it's been very hard, I invite Him in.
I've looked for hope in a lot of other places and never found it, but always found it in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.